Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
And now, Tim Dillon is going to hell.
Welcome to Tim Dillon is Going to Hell. We have a really interesting episode this week. We have another guy who's coming on who is anonymous, and this will not be the anonymous show. Chris Gethard is doing that. It's lovely, although I don't know if the people that are calling into his show are discussing what they're discussing on my show. But it's an anonymous episode because some people have done things in their lives that they want to talk about, and they don't want any retribution, legal and or otherwise. So we have an interesting conversation. When we did the Smiley Face episode, I was insistent that the guy who came on remain anonymous. He was less so. And I know that I said in the episode it was at his insistence that he was anonymous, but I actually suggested to him not revealing his name or his identity because it was a sensitive subject matter. I don't know, what's happening, what's not happening, but it was spooky enough to me that I would feel horrible if something happened to the guy. So I said at the end of the day, also, I didn't want him bombarded with weird questions and comments. Keep your anonymity. He's a private person. So this episode grew out of that. I spoke to a friend of mine. I was curious about the angle of this potential group of people recruiting on the dark web. This is what the detectives who came up with the smiley face theory had suggested. And I had said to my friend, I said, do you know anyone who has really a working knowledge of how things like that would work? And he put me in contact with someone, and we started talking. And I'd always said on the show that I wanted like a hacker on the show, and it was very hard to get one who would come on and talk about things that they were doing for obvious reasons. But I wanted also to do a show about not so much the dark web, but about, the culture of the internet and places that we don't really visit as much, whether they're deep websites, whether it's people on 4chan, whether it's people that are being radicalized in certain forums. So if you're coming into this episode and you're looking for dark web conspiracy theories, you're a dork, you should get married and start a family. Most of the stuff that's about the dark web is bullshit. There's no red rooms. Nobody's paying to see somebody else get tortured. You cannot hire a hitman. But there are a lot of interesting forums where, you have a lot of people getting radicalized, speaking freely about all manner of things. And that's happening, by the way, on the regular internet too. So we have a really interesting conversation about that. This is a guy that, started going online, became radicalized, started infiltrating sites, doxing people. He feels really bad about that now. So the conversation starts there, and it goes to some very interesting places about governments, their ability to hold on to proprietary information, hacking, how governments monitor, recruit hackers, collectives of hackers, things like Anonymous, and people that are idealistic and, are trying to hack governments and release information for the benefit of people, trying to influence elections, trying to steer public opinion in one way or another. And it's an interesting episode. It's not an episode about some video on the dark web that may or may not exist. It's not an episode about, an occult message board where we found, it's an episode that's pretty straightforward about things that we all know exist and happen and are real and are disturbing. And that's the funny thing about the dark web. People hear about all this torture, kid porn and shit, and they're like, but where's the really dark stuff? And you're like, kids are being tortured online. They're like, but where's the real dark stuff? Like the Goosebumps stuff. Where's the Stephen King stuff? What about the kids being tortured? But what about the red rooms? What about it's like, when will it ever be enough for you people? When will the horrors of the world on full display ever be enough for you fucks? You constantly have to keep digging and finding things that are worse. So it's not about any of that stuff. It's a real conversation about a guy who had a very interesting experience and kind of regrets it, and it's changed the way he thinks about the world. And it veers off into some very interesting places. And I'm not a tech guy. I know Grubhub relatively well. Social media, I'm somewhat adept at using that. But for the most part, I'm asking questions here because I'm genuinely interested in all of these matters. I'm pretty ignorant, embarrassingly so. I'm really behind the curve. I didn't really grow up online. I didn't really grow up on forums and in chat rooms. I don't really know the culture of these places and what goes on, but it's interesting to talk to somebody whose, ideas about life were probably formed more online than they were offline. So that's kind of the episode. So if you have realistic expectations, you'll really enjoy it. And I think it's really fascinating shit. This guy came on. We talked for about an hour and 15 minutes. He remains anonymous because he talks about drugs and some things and hacking and doxing, some things he'd rather not get out there. And I think that it's a very interesting episode. If you have the time, please rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. That's really important. We've experienced a real surge in listeners. We've had some really great guests. We have some really great guests coming up. The Smiley Face Killers episode is very popular. If you haven't listened to that, you should. We have a great episode with Ari Shafir, which is very popular. We also had the New York Times comedy critic on, Jason Zinnemann, and me and him went head to head. Giannis Pappas and Chris DiStefano, the Bay Ridge Boys, have a hilarious web series, really fun guys. They have a great podcast called History of Hyenas. That was our last episode. So I think you guys will find this as fascinating as I did. And like I said, it is a journey into not really only parts of the internet you might not be familiar with, but more importantly, it's a journey into the psyche of this guy. And I think it says a lot more about where we are right now as a country and the role technology is playing in our life than it says about any mysterious conspiracy that's out there. So it's very interesting. Hope you enjoy it. Goodbye. All right. So we are joined by our guest here, and I appreciate you coming on the show and taking some time to speak with us. So kind of just describe your journey about how you got on the dark web and what exactly that was like.
Yeah. So when I was in college, or when I started college, I had a hefty drug habit, as many men in their teens do, and I was sort of tired of going through the rigmarole of meeting many different people to facilitate drug deals. And a friend of mine told me about a website called Evolution, which was an offshoot of the Silk Road, which, is now common knowledge for a place you go to buy drugs and guns or whatever you want to, whatever you want to get on the deep web.
Does anyone sell food on the deep web?
It's not Uber Eats.
Okay. All right. Continue. Sorry.
Yeah. So I used it for a brief period of time in my infancy of Tor as a place to essentially just buy Coke and pills, because it was, in my opinion, easier than, dealing with bunk dealers in my hometown or, people that would just rip me off. What's cool about drug dealing on the deep web is that it really is a lot like Yelp and Amazon. People will leave comments and will leave reviews. It's easier to refine your searches in that way. And so that's how it started for me. And that's what it was, for a brief moment, until I got more involved with the leftist community in my hometown. And they knew me as a guy who would write papers for rich kids who didn't want to do their homework, but also knew some of my work that had been published on the internet regarding American foreign policy and, the CIA and intelligence groups and things like that. So they asked me if I wanted to start posting on a leftist forum blog on the deep web that was frequented by people from all over the world, but mostly people who were having governmental crisis at the time. Greece and other countries, they were experiencing, not full-blown civil wars, but a resurgence of both left and right-wing, far left and far right-wing politics. And so there were a lot of protests, and a lot of our blog posts were, how to, properly organize and, if you get hit with tear gas, what actually works and what's a myth. Now, these are things you can all post on the normal internet or regular internet, but we felt we had a sense of anonymity and privacy on the deep web where we didn't have to worry about, CIA spooks or, FBI guys, watching or, being government guys that have been ingratiated in the community that, were undercover reading our shit. And that eventually evolved into me being a part of a group of people that was responsible or asked rather to try to delve into right-wing groups in the deep web. Now, again, I don't know why. I can't explain the phenomenon, but for whatever reason, I found out that vanity websites, which are covers for child porn websites on the deep web.
Now, explain what a vanity website is to somebody like me who I don't know if you've seen a photo of me. Vanity would not be used to describe me. Not since 7 years old.
Tim, you're a very handsome man.
Well, I was.
No, so there was, from what I understand, this was before my time, but there was a time on the nether regions of the internet where you could just willy-nilly be like, here's a picture of a kid's dick. And, whatever, if that was your fucking jive. When I got heavily involved on Tor and was navigating through various parts of the deep web, whatever you want to call it, I found out that child porn websites were being buried under what was essentially vanity websites. Vanity websites would be like exactly what they sound like. They would be like selling, on the surface level, makeup and clothes and makeup tips and things like that. But if you knew where to click and where to look, you could find yourself on an entirely different page that was just inundated with child pornography. And again,
this was known on the deep web as like that the vanity sites were a cover. Was that like
and not at first, but it got to the point where you could go on to like the dark web got so popular around 2015, 2016, at least in my experience, that you could go if you were looking for drugs or whatever, you could go onto what's called dark wikis, and they were just places that held still active links for various websites, no matter what you were into. If you were there for drugs, if you were there for black market weapons or accessories for weapons, if you were there to buy like army surplus shit, like body armor, whatever the fuck, it didn't matter. But they would have, an entire link source for vanity websites.
Which seems odd. It seems odd. It's like drugs, guns, makeup.
Yeah.
It seems weird. Yeah.
And the only reason I found out about this again was because I was trying to infiltrate right-wing groups on the deep web, and just by circumstance, again, I'm not saying anything about either political leanings or whatever, but for whatever reason, there seemed to be, at least to me and a couple of my friends who are part of the group, that there was a crossover between extremely far-right groups. And we're not talking about Republicans or even neocons. I mean, we're talking about like, gas chamber,
neo-Nazis.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. And there was an extreme crossover between that and, like, for some reason, either porn that appeared to be of a child, but, or just shit that was, like, undeniably that's a fucking kid. And their forums were inundated with a lot of the same things we were talking about, how to properly riot, how to properly arm yourself, how to turn a semi-automatic into an automatic weapon. But also for some reason they were like, by the way, check this shit out. I have a video of my nephew naked. I uploaded it to this website, blah, 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 blah.
Did anyone else, because this is one of those things that it's just very interesting. Did anyone else in the forum go, hey, listen, we're just Nazis trying to prepare for the race war. Can you get this kid's dick out of here? Was there anyone on the forum that's like, hey, I'm all for gassing the Jews and, hitting a gay guy in the head with a rock, but can we not do the kid fucking? Was there anyone?
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing is that like, you knew almost immediately if a blog or a forum or something was just right wing or if it was a mixture of both. Like, you knew what you were getting into, like, as a person who was trying to infiltrate and trying to find information about the movement is like, if I went on to, like, for instance, there was one where, they had the Black Sun logo everywhere, which is a fascist symbol. And it was just, people talking about some mythical war or some mythical race war, as if it was some inevitable fact. A lot of survivalist talk. But the crossover ones, you knew immediately what those were too, because like the entire layout would be different. Like the other ones were militaristic in a sense, like a lot of like font that was just sort of like, it looked authoritarian. And the other ones would just be like normal forums almost, but it would be like one thread would be like, the difference between a true conservative and a patriot, and also, little dude's dick's 9.2. Like it was just you just knew when getting into it what one looked like because they were just so inherently different. But again, they all crossed the same pattern. They were all part of the same group.
Was there any equivalent of that on the left, on a far left group that was maybe anti-government, people talking about paramilitary action?
Yeah.
Was there any crossover on the left side or not really?
Oh, well, I mean, again, I'm not really going to like, I don't want to wax too poetic or extrapolate on like the left's issues with, with their internal issues with, women or whatever, but like on the leftist forums, people got banned all the time or got called out for just generally violent language about women and women's movements. I mean, a lot of people on Twitter and Facebook or what social media just talk about misogyny on the left, but when you have total anonymity and full privacy, I mean, shit gets weird. Even amongst people who politically I agree with would just say some strange fucking shit.
But see, do you see this is why you guys are losing? Because you're kicking people out for insensitive language, and the right's going, hey, come on in with a photo of your nephew, with how to build a fucking, bomb. It's a catch-all. Everybody in, I mean, there's got to be, so you're trying to infiltrate these groups. Why? To dox these.
Well, at the time, this was a time in which, now doxing, with 23andMe and people looking up ancestry, and I mean, that ancestry has always been a thing, but like people putting more and more of their information on the internet, like where they work and their phone number on Facebook and their address and shit, like it's doxing really isn't a fucking thing. People dox themselves just by being stupid on the internet. But we were working at a time in which we were trying to, find out who these people were and then like let their family, friends, and people know that they were a part of some Nazi online group, that they had these proclivities. And
how would you do that? How would you go about doxing somebody?
I can think of an example where we got a hold of a guy. We followed a guy online on the dark web who was stupid enough to use the same username on the deep web that he did on Reddit.
Okay.
We were only able to make the cross reference because enough of us had followed this guy's comments and shit on these forums, and one guy just so happened to be like, who was in a part of another leftist group in Austin that we actually had in Austin we had a beef with. They just happened to know the guy's username, and we shared info and was like, okay, this is who this guy is. And through tracking him on the open internet, we were able to find out, Twitter and Facebook and stuff. And it was just a matter of catching people being stupid on the deep web, thinking that anonymity is your friend, which in a lot of times people feel they're so anonymous they can be open and and they let shit slip. And that was our goal then. I disagree with it now, and I think it's wrong. But, you know, at the time, I was naive. You know, I was 19 years old. I just thought I was doing community work, but, you know.
Did you feel like a lot of the people that you were doxing were actually dangerous people, or do you think these were guys that were sick and had some sick ideas but were essentially harmless?
Then I was convinced they were dangerous, but now I look back and it's like, you know, I'm a working class person through and through. I went to college, but I've always been working class, and I'm still working class. I've worked with people who have insane ideas that are just trying to feed their fucking kids. You know, 6 years ago, I was like this, you know, I would have been like, this guy deserves to get fired. You know, we're going to plaster his face all over the fucking city. He's a menace. He's a pest. And I know people who still think that way. Now, I really think that type of behavior, whether you do it on Twitter or you do it in the bowels of the fucking nether regions of the internet, it's harmful to people. Like, you know, one of the dishwashers at an old restaurant I worked at had an SS tattoo on his arm. And I asked him about it. We were sharing a cigarette, and he was like, I was a skinhead punk in Washington, D.C. in the 80s. I wish it's like, I don't have the money, you know, I want to get it covered up, but I never have the money. I got 2 kids. It's like, you know, you just move on from I moved on from that mentality in a sense that, you know, these people deserve to be fired and deserve to be, you know, chastised and ridiculed in their community and deserve to have their lives ruined.
Right. Now that culture is now very prevalent on the regular internet. You know, probably it's much more so probably than the deep web. It's
for sure.
It's on Twitter, like you said. It's all over the place. Do you think that culture? Where would you say that culture originated? Do you think that's something that, you know, now we kind of call it cancel culture, but
call out culture, yeah.
Call out culture, yeah. Where is that from, do you think?
Well, I've mentioned this to, you know, other friends and people online. I think at one point years ago, woke culture, call out culture, whatever, had the capacity to at least do good, but it became this self-aggrandizing badge of honor to say, oh, look what I did. And I think its infancy started in, you know, people wanting to be recognized and given an award for their political beliefs. And I will say this as a person of the left, or formerly of the left, that it started amongst liberals. Now, I'm not a liberal, and I haven't been, and I'm not one, but it started amongst like centrist libs who were like, oh, you know, I worked at an internship, and one of my colleagues was a Republican, you know, and then that evolved to like full on revealing people's identities and getting them fired from their jobs.
Were there right-wing people trying to dox you guys on the left-wing forums too?
Yeah, there was counter stuff constantly. I knew a couple dudes who just dropped off forums altogether. I don't know why, whether it be visits from government agencies, which is on the more conspiracy side of it, or if they just got their identities found out. But I noticed this much later in life, and I don't know why. I can't place it. I'm not a sociologist, but being called a Nazi is much more dangerous to your fucking identity than being called like a liberal or something,
or a communist or something.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like, I mean, people called me a communist on the internet, and I was like, whatever, dude, I don't care. But like, I mean, people don't get fired. I've never heard on Twitter or Facebook of someone being fired for being a communist. I've heard countless stories of people being fired for even just being like paleo conservatives. Or neocons or whatever.
Right. So you're doxing these guys. You're infiltrating the forums. You know, you're buying some drugs. You're having fun. It is what it is. Is there any fear or anxiety that you have that your identity is going to become public and that you are going to get. And also, did any of this spill out into the real world ever? Are there any violent clashes or altercations? Because you're dealing with people that are anarchists. Are there any things that happen that kind of spill over into real life?
I mean, I always, to answer your first question, at first I was so naive when it was when I was just buying drugs. I fully and wholeheartedly believed that everything I was doing on there was completely anonymous. I was super naive and stupid about the entire process. As I moved away from buying drugs there and into a more political sphere, through people who had been online longer or had been a part of the deep web longer, or just people in my community that were more savvy with it, began to tell me that there are ways to reveal identities through Tor. And so there was always a paranoia there. But again, I was young, super young, and truly believed that not only was I doing something worthwhile and good, but there was no way. I made the catastrophic mistake of believing that the other side was stupid, which each side does all the time, and they drastically underestimate each other's, ability to protest or ability to be tech savvy or ability to, riot in the street or whatever. And I genuinely believe that I was like, I'm on the smart side of the war. They can't find out who I am. And even if they did, I'm some schmuck college kid with way too much fucking time on his hands.
Now, the people that you're kind of talking with in these forums, do any of these people truly believe that a race war is coming? Do you get the idea that these guys are true believers in that sense, and that they are, preparing and they're buying weapons and they're training? Is this to perpetuate a conflict, or is this more so to defend against an inevitable government crackdown or a police state activity? Which was it, or was it both?
I would say both, but one more than the other. Both sides, the side that I was on, the sort of anarchist, communist, socialist side, and the other side, the far right side, anarchists and communists and socialists that I knew, that I talked to both on the normal internet and the deeper parts of the internet and people in person, there were people on that side that truly believed that some sort of October revolution was coming in the States, and it was time to arm ourselves with not only weapons, but with technological know-how in order to navigate, whatever post-war internet would exist, or be able to, be savvy enough to be able to hack in or to navigate darker parts of the web and things that were technologically more difficult. Bank account, getting into police records and bank accounts and things like that. And, conversely or adversely on the other side, there were people that believed in a race war. Now, I now believe, as of 2019, that both sides are completely delusional. The world will go on without a revolution or some sort of race war. And, this government as it exists now, without delving too much into my own beliefs about it, will continue to exist because I truly believe that it's simply too powerful. But there were people on both sides, to answer your question, that were convinced that some cataclysmic revolution or race war was coming and that they had to prepare for it.
Right. And I asked that because I think when you look at forums like Reddit and 4chan, you find a lot of people that are saying some of the most heinous shit. You tend to get the idea that they're saying it for shock value. They're probably trying to get a rise out of people. It's their attempt at being edgy and subversive, and that none of those people, and also the people on the other side that are constantly punch Nazis, punch these people, attack, they're not doing any punching. There's a very small percentage of them that actually become violent. The larger group of people seems to just be invested in this idea of community to a certain degree.
Well, certainly. And to, again, answer your question for an example for both sides, up until very recently, I taught a self-defense class to a group of anarchists, socialists, and communists. My end goal wasn't to teach people how to fight fucking cops or people with gun, the Marines or whatever. I was just a part of the group to teach them how to defend themselves against people who were emboldened by the presidency. You know, there are people who will just walk into bars now and be like Trump, and then like try to start fights and then just be fucking dickheads. On the right, I would offer QAnon as an example of, you know, this movement that has just grifted elderly Republicans from what I understand and from my research and digging to be, you know, what I truly believe to be a group of very, very funny people and people who are very good at convincing elderly folk that there is a guy on Reddit with Q-level clearance in the government, which is top security clearance, that's leaking information to just people on Reddit in support of Donald Trump's movement to annihilate the deep state.
Yeah, and we've covered that on the show. And basically, what's amazing is, you know, my at one point I had a co-host, a great Ray Comp, and Ray's whole idea was he's like, listen, folks, how crazy do you need this to be? You know, Trump's the fucking president. Isn't it enough that Trump is the president? You need a secret, coded language from this guy on Reddit that's revealing all these secrets about Hillary and Barack going to Guantanamo for running a sex trafficking ring. It's like, what do you need every day? Are you that bored with real life that you need to invent these things? So you think that QAnon essentially is just a couple of fuckers having a good time?
Well, yeah, because, you know, if I'm offering positions at both sides, I mean, QAnon is more of a definitely more of a nationwide global scale. And my example for the left was local. I mean, I was, I boxed since I was 12, and I did all these jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai and shit. So I was just, people were joining the group and wanting to learn how to fight and wanting to learn. They legitimately believed. I mean, there were some people that were like, I'm just here to learn how to throw a punch. But there were some people that were like, I'm armed to the fucking teeth and I'm ready for the revolution now. And, and I remember talking to people on the internet and in person and being like, okay, like, I don't fucking buy it for a moment. And like I said, on the opposite side of the spectrum, but on a much larger scale, you have this QAnon guy or QAnon people rather, whichever one, who's essentially recruiting people into a group, or really, I mean, what it amounts to, I think, is a cult of people who genuinely are buying the concept that there's this, like one of my favorite things that they talk about is that the Mueller investigation is a distraction, and Trump's going to start literally arresting people in the deep state and exposing them as like child eaters and like kid fuckers. And it's like, I mean, what?
Yeah. Anybody, by the way, anyone who thinks that rich pedophiles are going to jail, as nice as that sounds, and as much as I'm on board for that, but anybody who starts a conversation with me and goes, the reckoning is coming, I'm like, I gotta be honest with you. As nice as that would be, and as much as I'm for that, tragically, the reckoning's not coming. It may win an Academy Award, but certainly not going to jail.
Slightly related, but I mean, to add sort of an example of, what I went through, I auditioned for a commercial when I was in high school, and my mother came and brought my younger brother. I auditioned for a Colgate commercial in high school. The lady and the guy that were in the room stopped me 2 seconds into the read and then were like, how old is your brother? And I was like, he's 8. And they were like, can he do the read? And I was like, motherfucker, I'm here for me. Like, he's just here because my mom works, a bunch of jobs and had an hour off to her day and decided, I'll come with my son to his commercial audition. I was the opposite. I would go in for commercials, and I would say, "Can I suck anyone's dick?" And they would be like, "We'll let you know. Just please wait outside." So that was even more embarrassing. Is trying to fuck the director and being turned down, being rejected. You want to talk about? So let's for a minute, because the government clearly created the dark web. I talked to you the other day. You said
it's essentially now a honeypot. If you're selling drugs, if you're doing anything, they're going to catch you. Is it?
I wouldn't say. I don't mean to interrupt. I wouldn't say they're going to catch you. But what I mean by a honeypot is that Tor was created by the government as a means of transmitting information, and then the public got a hold of it. Did some things, altered some shit. By a honeypot now, what I mean is that, like, you're not going to get a knock on your door for buying an 8-ball, but
a lot of people in my audience just took a deep breath of relief. There was a great sigh of relief among all of the Gas Digital subscribers.
Yeah, fucking. I know. Lewis himself is like, holy shit.
Lewis, yeah. If Lewis could figure out how to get on the dark web, he wouldn't run Gas Digital. And I love Lewis, but let me tell you,
I'm gonna end up on fucking. I'm gonna end up on the fucking Lewis's podcast. He's like, dude, you gotta fucking tell me, like, what the fuck were you into?
Yeah. So you're basically saying that it's not an able, but if you're fucking around with large amounts, you're selling large amounts of drugs, or if you're running a child porn site or something like that, there's these are things that they are monitoring too, and they're probably monitoring anti-government groups and forums.
For sure.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, when we spoke last, we talked about the guy that had 54 terabytes of fucking CP on his computer, on his massive motherboard or whatever the fuck. And I think now, taking what I knew then and applying it to knowledge I know now, I would say that there's no way after over a decade of this thing being live, of Tor being a live thing, that the CIA or the NSA or the FBI hasn't figured out how to properly and adequately track users of this software. I mean, we're talking about people who, all the cutting edge forefront of technology, they're on the edge of it because they use it for security or security, quote unquote, and, invasion of privacy. I think people are naive and stupid if they're still on it and they're like, oh, I bought like 100 exo pills from Denmark. And then, it's cool because they're from Denmark. It's like, no, you fucking idiot. Like, it's legal for them to sell it there, or decriminalized rather, but it's illegal for it to show up on your front door in a fucking My Little Pony backpack.
Did you ever get the feeling that when you're on these leftist forums that anybody was a Fed, or that anybody on the right side was a Fed? Because we know every significant anti-government movement in history has
been co-opted.
100%.
Yeah, definitely. There were moments.
Did you ever bump into any of those communists that were a little too in shape? They were a little too, they had their shit a little too together. They showed up to the self-defense class on time.
Yeah, not hungover or sweating from a coke bender.
Right.
No, like I pulled out of the local leftist movement because I found out rather recently that a lot of it's been co-opted by police and fucking, people that work for the State Department. And then as far as to answer your question about the dark web, absolutely. I mean, we were always constantly told to be vigil, by people who were there longer than us, to be careful about, I mean, it's like, yeah, you're on the dark web, but, there are people who work for the government in the intelligence, area of the government that know how to work these things. I had more trouble with it when I was selling and buying drugs, because there were people who were just so sketched out, and even myself being included, that I would just shut a deal down because somebody said the wrong thing.
Right.
On forums, they were, getting to the Silk Road or going to Evolution or any of these other ones. I mean, people talked about them on the normal internet. The forums that I went to were buried a little bit deeper and were a little bit harder to find. But these drug selling and dealing websites, I mean, I heard about them through word of mouth.
Right.
And I mean, there were, I can think of a few times. One I'm thinking of in particular was when I was trying to buy a pretty large quantity of cocaine, like half an ounce. I mean, large to some. I don't know who your listeners are, but trying to buy like half an ounce, a little over, of cocaine on a drug website on the dark web, and these little message boxes would pop up on this website I was on, and the deal was going fine, and I was like, do you do Bitcoin? What kind of transactions do you do? And the guy was just insistent upon doing a transaction through like banks, which is like either the person's stupid or they're a Fed. And because if you have somebody's route, like checking and account info, it's not that hard to get their name, and then it's obviously super easy to find out who they are.
Yeah, the whole thing is Bitcoin. I mean, that's the whole game.
Yeah. And the rule of thumb on there was like, if there's a guy who's trying to like get a Western Union transfer or some sort of, or if they're across the continent, across the pond, and they're trying to do some transfer that wasn't Bitcoin or wasn't some other sort of crypto thing, that they were either they worked for Interpol or something, or they were just stupid and you didn't want to buy their shit anyways.
Right. Now, so let me ask you another question, because we had the smiley face episode. These detectives were like, we think these people are recruiting on the dark web. They're communicating on the dark web. And do you think that is possible? And if it is possible, how would they do it? Is it the vanity website again? Is it, by the way, come here for this makeup tutorial, and if you click this link, we'll subtly ask you if you want to throw someone in the river? How exactly would that manifest if that was happening?
To answer the first part of your question, knowing what I know, having fucked around on deep web in my youth, and on tour, and then believing that the smiley face killers exist. Again, we're operating on the contingency of, my perception of these drownings and then my perception of the internet. I truly believe that they're recruiting on the dark web because of the fact that, if you view these drownings as murders, as we spoke on the phone prior, there is an immense level of sophistication and tact. I mean, the guy that you had on the show, and then the stories that I've read about, people, going to parties or going to house parties or bars or whatever, and then, ending up drowned in a river, 5 miles away from the nearest bar college town. I mean, you don't get away with that for 20 plus years unless you're operating with an immense level of surveillance knowledge, counter surveillance knowledge, human intelligence knowledge, tech savviness, whatever technology. I mean, these people have to be operating with
large amounts of know-how. And so
the second part of your question, I believe they're recruiting on the dark web, and if they are indeed doing so, they're doing it, I would imagine, through part nepotism, part like, hey, I'm into this thing. You have to be able to, I imagine there's a lot of heavy vetting that goes into getting, people involved in this thing. And then two, I imagine that they have some heavily encrypted, buried deep, even with as far as Tor goes, part of the internet where they discuss their plans and discuss their tactics. Because these people aren't doing it on Reddit. They're not doing it on fucking Twitter, obviously. They have to be using some sort of heavily encrypted means of communication. And even though I said before that I think a large part of Tor is a honeypot, I think that if you're smart enough, I'm not that smart, but if you're smart enough, you know where to go in parts of that world where even, the smartest of the smart can't find you or be able to track who you are.
So now let's ask a question about hackers and about Cicada 3301, and we're entering a very interesting time. We had WikiLeaks, Julian Assange. We had a lot of information released to that potentially, depending on who you talk to and what you believe, made an impact on the presidential election.
Sure.
How are governments recruiting hackers? And are they recruiting hackers? I would imagine they are. And how are they doing it? And Cicada 3301, for people that don't know, and you could probably, you know a lot more about it than I do, but essentially it was a game. And the game was, and they were very open about this, was recruiting people that were extremely intelligent, proficient in this technology for some unknown purpose. And it was kind of like a scavenger hunt, and you had to solve all these different puzzles. And nobody really has definitively proven who these people are, even though it's widely accepted now that there's some type of private group that was recruiting people for some purpose. A lot of people thought that was CIA or MI6 or whatever, but in our conversations, you said that that's not necessarily how, in your experience, governments recruit hackers. And then you told me something which was very interesting about how governments recruit people with those skills.
Yeah. To answer the first part of your question, when the NSA or the NSA does this more than any other intelligence group or department. When the NSA wants to recruit somebody to work in the cyber division, cybersecurity, they don't need to scour the deep web for smart people. What they do and have been doing for a number of years is they wait for a smart kid to make a mistake, to try to dig into bank records or credit card records, police records, criminal records, but usually on a much grander scale as if they had some sort of motive. And so what they'll do is the NSA and the CIA, but usually the NSA will essentially be like, okay, so you've committed a litany of felonies. A lot of these guys are teens, early 20s. You can either go to jail, do not pass go. Like it's if the NSA is trying to prosecute you, it's not going to be a publicized easy fucking trial. It's like you can either go to jail and be questioned for years, or you can come and make six figures. The NSA and these intelligence communities don't need to scour the deep web for stenographers and linguists and code breakers, hackers. They don't need to do that. They just have to wait for somebody, usually, often young men with too much time on their hands and a heavy knowledge of computers, to just get bored one day and be like, I'm going to hack into my local Chase. Or, I'm going to try to disseminate. I'm thinking of one example where a guy on my side of the aisle, and I can't think of his name genuinely, on my side of the aisle was releasing names of police officers and their home addresses and emails and phone numbers and all sorts of shit, was just mass doxing people a few years back. And there was a news article on him, and now he ended up taking a fucking job working for the government. They offered him a plea deal, and he ended up, I don't know what department, but he didn't go to jail. And I'm assuming, based on that knowledge, that he didn't go to jail, that he ended up working for the State Department, working for some intelligence committee somewhere in the bowels of some building. And as far as Cicada 3301 goes, their codes range everywhere from linguistics to code breaking to steganography to just basic to like scavenger hunting based on clues. In my opinion and my understanding of how intelligence communities work, even worldwide, a federal government doesn't need to go through that much trouble. I mean, these puzzles were spread across continents. The federal government and foreign governments don't need to go to that much trouble to recruit agents that want to work in cybersecurity. Now, what kind of group would have to go through that much trouble to make sure people are smart enough, secure enough, and capable enough to work for them? It would have to be some sort of insurgent group. Right.
And you've looked into Cicada 3301, and I think you tried to contact one of the guys who solved one of the puzzles. Did you ever get in contact with him? And reading about it, what, in your opinion, what is this organization or group, dedicated to doing? You said that the Chilean government had done a report on them recently.
Yeah. So I first found out about them just through somebody had posted a link to a YouTube video of their manifesto and was like, check out this creepy video I found on YouTube. And I was like, all right, whatever, I got time. And this was in 2013. They had already released a puzzle. The video was sort of about their belief system. They're heavily intertwined with the occult. A lot of their philosophy is like Nietzsche stuff, Übermensch, there's nothing, we are nothing, blah, 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 blah. Fucking 10th grade philosophy bullshit. But their sophistication when it comes to cyber understanding is, second to none. And to answer your second question, yeah, the guy, there was a guy that was written. So apparently a guy in 2014 was the only person so far, and as of at that time when I read the article, to solve a cicada puzzle. And it took him across different countries, all over like the Northern Hemisphere to solve this puzzle. And, it ranged from like, in-depth steganography, which is, images embedded with images, languages and codes embedded with codes, to, breaking, codes on the deep web and getting into access to forums, which had codes, to even, picking up a fucking payphone in Texas and typing in a certain phone number, which led him to another clue. And he solved the puzzle apparently and got to the last, sort of like congratulations, which was, according to him, a page on the deep web. And I tried to reach out to the author of the article to try to reach out to the guy who solved it. But unfortunately, I never got a response. Now, I don't know if it's because the guy didn't want to talk about it anymore, or maybe got recruited after all and then dropped off the face of the earth, or, something else happened. I don't know. But
some people have released, I think, these letters or supposedly that they got in the final stage of the puzzle, where Cicada was basically like, we'll be honest, we are dedicated to like a few principles, privacy, that information should be free, and that we're essentially like a think tank that is dedicated to creating software to help protect people's privacy, which was kind of like anticlimactic for a lot of people who thought it was a government recruiting thing, or they thought that the group had more nefarious purposes. But what exactly happened with the government of Chile? That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so we spoke on the phone a few days ago about it, and then before we hopped on the phone, I wanted to refresh my memory, so I went and sort of dug through some old posts about it and stuff, and apparently the Chilean government, I don't know why it was them or if they were bluffing or whatever, but apparently they had gotten down to the granular level of this group and was asserting that the group was indeed had motives to prepare for some sort of cataclysmic cyber event that was to occur within the coming years, and they were recruiting for people that were, as you said, open to open source information and freedom of transfer information and things, but on a much more sort of revolutionary level. And now, to dig further into that thing, apparently Cicada released a statement saying that wasn't their case, that wasn't their cause. But again, when you're talking about a group like this, if they make a statement, it's literally impossible to ascertain as to whether or not it's the Cicada group making the statement. And so, the mythos around them still surrounds them heavily. There's the idea that they're a think tank, as you said. There's the idea that one of the more interesting theories that I read about was that they were a group trying to fully erase debt, specifically credit card and college debt. The show Mr. Robot took a little bit of credence with this mythos, but that they wanted to erase, like people that were in like debt records on a massive sort of cyber scale.
Well, do you think that they'll erase records? Let's say you were coked out in Long Island, you bought a $600,000 house with a subprime mortgage, and you took a real beating on that, and do you think they'd be dedicated to something like that, or is it more, I guess it's all just fucking Sally Mae student loan fucking debt? Jesus Christ.
I would love to be on the side that says they would erase the fact that I got really drunk and walked into Nissan with a 510 credit score and said, I would like to buy this brand new car, please. And then walked out with an incredibly high interest rate and payments I can't afford anymore.
Yeah. Everybody likes to fuck in theory, but when it comes right down to it, some people just can't perform in the way that they would want. That's the reality. But if you like sex, you'll like BlueChew.com. Blue Chew offers men a performance enhancement for the bedroom. Why wouldn't you like to last longer and go extra rounds? You got to impress that lady or man that you're going to marry, and you got to do it the first night. That's right. They're not going to give you a second chance. So Blue Chew makes the first chewable with the same active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis. Chewables work faster than pills. I know that because I take Pepto-Bismol chewables, and they work phenomenally, and they're really good. But this is not for that. This is Blue Chew. This is for your dick. You can take Blue Chew on a full or empty stomach. It's cheaper than Viagra. It's cheaper than Cialis. All you have to do is take a few minutes to fill out a form online. There's no doctor visit. There's no awkward conversation. You don't have to wait in line at the pharmacy and bump into somebody at high school who always knew that you're a loser and is now 100% certain because you got dick pills in your hand. None of that has to happen, okay? It ships directly to your door, or for my audience, your mother's door, in discreet packaging. Your mother doesn't know what it is. She's just going to think maybe you got a job, or maybe somebody's trying to recruit you into the military, okay? But you know what it is. It's dick pills. Blue Chew chewables are prescribed online by a doctor, and they're made in the USA, okay? It gives you the confidence that you need in bed every time. You and your partner will love it. I'm telling you, okay? Here's a great deal for you. If you visit BlueChew.com and get your first order free when you use promo code TD, just pay 5% shipping. Listen, fuckheads. Listen to what I just said. You get your first order free when you use promo code TD. $5 shipping. You get a bunch of dick pills for free. You just have to fill out a little fucking form. Come on. Who's not doing that? That's BLUEchew.com, promo code TD, okay? I'm telling you, you're not going to regret it. You need to be prime. Especially when you get a chance, you need to be knocking it out of the park so that you can lock that person down in a great relationship, get married, and we all know everything's going to work out. So BlueChew.com, you get a big hard dick or a hard dick, whatever it is. Doesn't make your dick bigger. Maybe it does. It's $5 shipping. You have nothing to lose, okay? Listen, whether you're fucking a man, a woman, an animal that's consensual, you want to perform. BlueChew.com, promo code TD, first offer free, 5% shipping. There is literally no reason. Hey, if you're a lady, get them for your man. Get him for your boyfriend. Get him for that cuck, okay? And tell him, listen, why don't you fucking please me once in a while, you fat slob? Listen, it's great for birthdays, holidays, whatever you want to do. Fill out a form online. Incredibly easy. You start fucking every day, all day. BlueChew.com, promo code TD. Thank you. What would differentiate a group like Cicada from Anonymous? What is Anonymous is is a collective of hackers, right? And they tried to shut down child porn sites on the deep web. They generally, I think, try to do positive things, Anonymous, from what I understand.
Yeah, well, the problem with Anonymous was, and people have criticized the Occupy Wall Street movement for the same thing, is that what I think separates Cicada and Anonymous is that Anonymous was a collective of hackers and tech-savvy people. But there were so many people that claimed to be working under the Anonymous umbrella that they seemed to have no statement of purpose. I mean, you would have guys that would wave the Guy Fawkes mask, and they would have it on their Twitter, or they would have it on their, with their AV on different forums. They'd be like, shut down child porn websites, and then there would be guys claiming they worked for Anonymous that were extremely far far right or far left, that were advocating violence and trying to dox people and do, things to incriminate people and, harm other people's lives. So what I think separates a group like Anonymous and a group like Cicada is, first of all, Cicada operates on a much more sophisticated level, in my opinion. I don't think it's an alternate reality game or an ARG or I don't think it's a puzzle. It is a puzzle, but I don't think it's for entertainment. I think it's for recruitment. What separates both of them is that, in my opinion, Anonymous had way too many people flying a banner to unify one group, and Cicada, I think, is a much smaller group with more cohesion. That they have a mission statement.
Right.
They have a statement of purpose.
Now, there are these, I don't know if you call them celebrity hackers, but that guy, Kim.com or whatever his name is. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yeah.
Or Gooseifier, and these guys are like just seemingly like lone wolf, big deal guys that are hackers and that are either interested in releasing proprietary information from governments or now are those guys, do you imagine, and I'm sure it's different for in each individual case, but are those guys, do you think, backed by governments or groups, or do you think in a lot of cases these guys are just actors independently with a guy like Julian Assange, for example? Is this a guy that you think is just an independent actor, or is it likely that he is backed by some, is he guided by just an ideology? Is he into being a celebrity? How would you classify WikiLeaks in this climate of, different hackers, whether they be individuals or groups, releasing information for a certain purpose? Where do you put WikiLeaks in that?
To answer your question, I would use a series of sort of real life examples where take a Kim.com or Gooseifier guy, like whatever, like if you're leaking information that the government deems dangerous to them, you don't get to be a celebrity in the sense that you're not consistently persecuted by for example, Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden. I mean, Edward Snowden said in an interview, and he said it multiple times, that if I ever land back in the States and I'm there for longer than a week, they'll kill me. I'll die, and it will look like an act. And then Chelsea Manning spent years
tortured
for information that she leaked. And to answer your question, Kim.com or whatever, he's living on the fringe or whatever, and like supposedly in and out of hiding. And there are some people that like leaked information and shit. But I mean, I think that like if you're leaking information and you can walk around safe, you are likely some sort of intelligence psyop, in my opinion. Call me paranoid. But if you have to literally do what Manning or what Snowden ended up having to do, which was to, ask for asylum in a variety of different countries and, call in and do video conferences from across the Atlantic, you leaked something that wasn't supposed to be found out. Now, granted, Barack Obama pardoned Chelsea Manning, but I'm of the opinion that he wanted nothing to do with that pardon. But he had so much immense pressure from social media and left-wing and sort of free speech journalists that I think he did it out of that pressure. I don't think he really even had he said it was, an act of whatever. But I think he did it out of pressure to pardon Chelsea Manning. I don't think that dilutes her efforts. And I think the fact that, she's very active on Twitter and things, but
we know.
Yeah.
We know.
Yeah.
I felt a lot worse for her when she wasn't on Twitter, Twitter can make anybody you look at anybody. Listen, if I was tortured for a year, people would be like, that sucks. Then people go to my Twitter and went, well, of course. Like, social media doesn't help anybody's case. But
I'm in the same boat. I mean, like I said, I know she's active on the internet and everything, but I mean, I'm thoroughly convinced she probably has a handler now.
Okay. Interesting. Well, what about Assange? What about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks specifically?
When we spoke about this, we talked. I talked briefly about it. I think in the early days of WikiLeaks and Assange, there was a genuine desire to disseminate information that world governments didn't want disseminated or released or whatever. I'm not a fucking English major. I say stupid shit, but and then I think it became for Assange. At least just for him, not for WikiLeaks as a whole, but for Assange, it became about celebrity. And then, thank God I'm anonymous on this. I didn't say this in the phone conversation, but I'll say it now. That case against him where he is...
By the way, if anyone is wondering who we have on the phone, it is Louis C.K. Sorry to dox you. Continue, sir.
Oh, my God. Damn it.
Damn it.
You fucking got me. Hey, I'll be at the Comedy Cellar doing 30 minutes.
All right, go on. What were you saying?
Yeah, there was a, people were calling Assange a rapist. Apparently, he had a case from a few years back where he acted sexually aggressively towards someone. And a lot of his credibility has since been nullified by that fact. And also by the fact that he sort of bought into the celebrity thing. But a lot of people that backed him years ago were like, oh, he's a rapist now. I'm not saying that thing didn't happen, but I'm also saying that it's incredibly convenient that a guy who for pretty much a decade released government leaks is all of a sudden, I'm not, guys are shitty and do shitty things, but all of a sudden this guy's a rapist. Right. And all of a sudden his credibility is diluted, and all of a sudden people look at WikiLeaks with this, grave cloud, this fucking, dreary, very critical viewpoint. That to me, fuck Assange. If he did it, fuck him, but don't discredit a group and a website and a movement that to this day continues to leak shit that I think people need to know about.
Do you put any credence to this idea that that any part of it is a Russian op and that they leaked information to hurt Hillary Clinton in the election specifically? Because if you look at the information that they released when they released it, it's kind of hard to make the argument that they weren't trying to hurt her candidacy. However, she joked around about droning Julian Assange, so there's no reason why he wouldn't want to damage her candidacy. But do you think that there's any type of state backing for that organization indirectly or directly, or you think this is an independent guy who's got a beef with Hillary Clinton and he's releasing information that's targeting her and her campaign? Or do you feel like, supposedly his whole thing was, hey, we release information that we are leaked when we are leaked it. It is what it is. We're the conduit. Don't shoot the messenger. Do you think that's probably more the case? And that it's just basically they're releasing what they get when they can verify that it's true? Or do you think that he's picking and choosing what to release when?
To be honest, Tim, when we first spoke, I had my opinions on it, and you honestly swayed me a little bit.
I mean, this ends with you on Fox News. You know this.
Yeah. I'm on fucking Red Eye or some shit.
This ends with you and me on Fox. I did Red Eye for 2 years, never made $1. Killing the game. Killing the game, baby.
Oh my God.
Well, I don't know that I was trying to sway you, but I just found it's an interesting topic of conversation. And listen, you sway,
for sure.
Yeah. So what do you kind of think about it?
I first of all, and I say this genuinely, I believe in my fucking heart of hearts that Hillary Clinton on her own ruined her own campaign. We don't got to talk about that. That's not the topic of discussion.
Agreed.
She didn't need a fucking Russian. Say the Russians were involved. She didn't need that to lose. She basically ran on a campaign that was "I'm not Trump," and then fucking lost. And people were like, "Oh, well, she won the popular vote." That hasn't mattered, and it's never fucking mattered, and it will never matter because the Electoral College will never be abolished. But anyway, to answer your question more specifically, I think I would not be surprised, but I wouldn't say definitively that a foreign government intelligence agency that's operated historically, like say the Russians or whatever. I don't buy too much into the Russian toppling of the election. I think, again, she did it enough on her own. But when we spoke earlier on the phone a few days ago, I would not be surprised if Putin or whoever genuinely felt that they could manipulate and better operate under Trump than they would a Clinton and Kaine presidency, or whatever the guy's name was, ran as a VP. I don't remember. Tim Kaine, I think. And the reason for that being is that, as we mentioned earlier, and I've talked about other people before, and we talked about, the guy didn't want the job and doesn't want it. But he loves the attention. And I think in terms of Julian Assange and info leaking, I think that if there was a way to get him elected through a formerly trusted leaking information source, like people that leaked genuinely informative and, in my opinion, morally good shit, was like, oh, by the way, Hillary is this monster of a person and this failure of a person, then, maybe people that were on the mid or in the middle of voting would trust that information. Specifically more paranoid people or people who may identify as libertarian that weren't going to vote, maybe were swayed towards Trump's side because of the information leaked surrounding Hillary that came from a news source that literally exists on its own perception of itself as like one of the last remaining credible news sources in the world.
Now, extrapolating on this major point where we have the government now, there's sort of this massive crackdown on fake news or Russian bots and trolls, and we've discussed that, and some of that is indisputably true. Russia's trying to impact our election. I have no problem believing that. We've tried to impact every election that's ever taken place everywhere. The government right now seems very uncomfortable with the amount of freedom that people have on social media. They're deplatforming people. It's taken the form of deplatforming a lot of people on the far right, but I think me and you both know that censorship will swing back left, and eventually, and it is already, it's silencing guys like Chris Hedges talk about writing for sites like TruthDig that because they're critical of American foreign policy are put under this umbrella of Russian agitators and Russian bots. What do you think going forward is going to be the strategy of governments like the U.S., like the U.K., and governments all over the world? Some of them are doing it more explicitly. How are they going to clamp down on the power that people have right now to share information? And do you ever see a point when we're getting to an internet that's far less free? And is that something that's this Orwellian idea that a lot of people have, or are we heading there rapidly now?
To answer your first question, I don't believe that a revolution will happen as far as people versus people goes on the streets, or people versus army or whatever. I don't believe in an armed insurgency, right or left, will be victorious. The only way I see some sort of cataclysmic event happening it's going to happen on the internet, and it's going to happen, via social media. And I think that we saw it happen, for better or for worse, whether or not it was backed by government groups or not. It happened in the Arab Spring some years back. The way we operate, in my opinion, on social media now is we're enjoying this. It's getting harder to breathe for some people, be it right or left, it doesn't matter. But we're enjoying this freedom now where, we're able to say things and retweet certain articles and be a part of certain group chats and things. And I feel like a lot of people operate under the willful ignorance that they aren't being monitored. Like, I have a group DM with some other comics and friends of mine, and we say awful fucking shit. And none of it of any interest to any intelligence community. But if there exists, which I'm sure there does, a group DM on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, whatever, that they're being monitored if they're saying things that, challenge a government or challenge a movement. I knew a guy in high school, a Republican guy who, I don't know if you guys remember being able to tweet through text you could like text and it would like tweet. You know, you didn't have to open the app; you could just text it or whatever. He tweeted through text that he was going to kill Obama upon his arrival in the city that we went to school in, and he got a fucking knock on his door. I'm not saying that, you know, whether or not I'm not saying what he said is right or wrong. I think the bigger problem is that, you know, threatening a president, is dangerous or whatever.
We'll say what he said was wrong, just for the show.
Yeah.
Just for the show. We'll just say it. We'll say it. We'll say it. You know?
Yeah. You know, like what he said was wrong.
Listen, there's a New York City comic, Jake Flores, who tweeted a joke about ICE, and he got a fucking knock on his door from the Department of Homeland Security. So they're out there, and they're treating all of these things very, very seriously, and some of that's understandable. I'm just wondering if, like, we're heading towards that technocracy where we get to a point eventually where the internet is just it's basically something where, you know, you're prevented from sharing information that's considered anti-government. And what's considered anti-government, we understand threats against the president, but that umbrella gets so big to where it includes legitimate critiques of government policy, you know? Or
I think, yeah.
YouTube is censoring conspiracy videos now, and you're like, well, what's a conspiracy? Because if you had come out and said that the U.S. was running a labyrinth of torture prisons and black sites after the Abu Ghraib photos had come out, and it was described by our government as a few bad apples, and you said, no, there's actually an organized, I mean, if you had said a week after those photos were released, no, there's an organized top-down plan that was put in place, and we designed a torture program with doctors and with experts on Arab culture, and we're renditioning people and taking them to countries where they will torture them, you would have been called a conspiracy theorist and worse. So to me, it's like the idea that you're just going to, start censoring conspiracy material is sort of a problem. And I don't think that, and I understand the conspiracy theory stuff a la Sandy Hook can get way out of control. But when you start to really clamp down on people's ability to question events and to question narrative, I think you're heading towards a very, bad place.
For sure. And I mean, to offer you an example, I think, I made a joke about this among some friends and constantly find myself thinking about it. The FBI investigated the Las Vegas shooting and they were like, and I'm not trying to turn this into a fucking conspiracy theory episode, but they investigated the Las Vegas shooting and they were like, we can't find a motive.
Right.
And I mean, it was a tragedy what happened. I think it actually happened, of course, but part of me is like, why was the dude's hotel room set up like a Bourne movie? And why the fuck, did this guy with really no prior or anything decide to go fucking, hog wild on a concert out of nowhere? And I think that about the, social media and intelligence monitoring and things, I think personally, I tend to be a worst case scenario guy.
Well, in Stephen Paddock's defense, have you ever had a country music concert outside of your hotel room? You know what I mean? I stayed at Mohegan Sun once, and there was a Kenny Chesney concert. And let me tell you right now, if I had had any weaponry, I would have, let's get real.
Fucking Tombstone-esque slaughter. I mean, what? I mean, again, like I think that you're correct in the assumption or the assertion rather that we're sliding towards this world where, this beautiful technology that we have. I mean, I can call you from states away. I can, read about whatever I want. It is being used against us, and it's going to be used against us further as more people get comfortable with things like Amazon, Echo and whatever the fuck. I mean, it's becoming, we're allowing our surveillance. We're allowing to be spied upon, and we're comfortable with it because it's a gadget and a doodad. And it does cool shit like fucking order porn for us off the internet, and we can buy dildos and fucking soda. And no one, bats a fucking eye because we're like, oh, it's my computer. So no one knows. And it's like, no, they fucking know. They know what you're buying on the fucking internet and they listen to you.
Right. So final question. And by the way, I really appreciate you coming on because this was a really good and interesting talk because I think and the reason I haven't done like an episode with somebody to talk about more of this stuff is because it's either drenched in politics, which kind of turns people off on either side, or it's kind of these conspiracy mongering people that are talking about these things that are provably untrue, like hiring hitmen and there's a red room where you could pay to watch people get tortured and all of these, kind of provably untrue stories that float around and they're not true. But what is really interesting about this to me is that this is kind of the reality going forward. And the reality going forward, and I see it in my business, is that if you do not have a social media presence, you're pretty much done. Like you have to opt in. You cannot live you cannot live a normal life without really submitting to this technology. And this technology that is used to monitor you, to listen to you, it's surveillance, it's used to impact the way that you think and what you believe and what stories you read. And it caters certain, it caters to your worst impulses and some of your best impulses, and it sells you shit. And it's amazing to me that, we're really in this place now where our lives, it's unimaginable that you could really just disconnect from all of this. It would be very tough. I mean, to make a reservation at a restaurant, sometimes they're like, email us now. We're not even picking up our phone. So it is really, and you said it, we're like volunteering for it because there is fun shit. I just ordered 3 sushi rolls and a guy, from Grubhub, he just pulled up and gave them to me. And I mean, it's like, our lives are made so much easier. But the flip side of that is you're losing freedoms and you didn't even realize that you kind of had them. Yeah. You're losing them and they're kind of gone forever. And as far as like the future of the dark web, it's pretty much gone mainstream. All of those things that you guys used to do, doxing, calling people out, all of that, race war, far left, far right, anti-government groups. That's all. You could find it on Reddit. You could find it on 4chan. I mean, it's almost like, you still have the drugs and the child porn and some real sick shit on there. But a lot of that, crazy, facilitation of our worst impulses and the effect that anonymity has on people is now just part of the way we live. It's part of our life, It's no longer a deep web. It's no longer a dark web. It's just the way things are. And it's like, it is really crazy. So my final question to you, what role does technology play in your life now? Because you're a guy that you were kind of in it. You were doxing people. You were in it. You felt, that you were doing the right thing. As a guy that's kind of been through that and seen some of the uglier things, where are you at now with all of this stuff? Like where are you at? Are you disgusted by it when you go on Twitter and you look at it? Do you go, this shit sucks? Do you laugh at it? Are you like, this is funny? We're kind of all watching the world burn. Where are you at with it?
I'm to answer it just plain and simply, I'm incredibly fucking paranoid. Call it whatever you want. Maybe I spent too much time online or whatever. I had a job interview recently where the interviewer asked me why I had all of my social media, excluding Instagram, which I don't really use, set to private.
Because I'm a Nazi. Next question.
No, I was like, well, I post a lot of child porn. No, and to agree, I completely agree. I mean, the job I have now, I get emailed my schedule to go to work. My boss, I didn't give it to him, but he was like, hey, can I get your social media handles in case, phone's off or something, or if we ever need to get a hold of you? And I was like, no, I'm not comfortable with that. I mean, you have we're almost at the point now where you have to have a fucking smartphone just to get by, just to work in the real world or to operate in any, any sort of sense. And to answer your question, like I said, I'm not disgusted so much as I am interested to see how it turns out. But that interest is clouded by a heavy paranoia, because being involved with extremist groups in my life and knowing people that have just gone to jail for being at a protest, or for going to a protest and then they use their social media accounts against them, I'm incredibly paranoid about my own involvement with it. And that's why I mostly now just post dick jokes and like shit I'm eating at the point, like Taco Bell menu items and things. But, it's like watching a car crash. I'm interested in it, but I'm also fucking terrified of it ever happening to me.
Right. Well, I'll leave us with this. I'm part of an extremist group called Comedians, and nothing would make me happier than me and Jimmy Fallon sharing a jail cell. So if anybody wants me to help facilitate the mass arrest of comedians, QAnon style, and sending them into Guantanamo Bay, baby, DM me. Let's get it going. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. It's a fucking fascinating episode. You're the best, and we're going to talk a lot more. I really appreciate you coming on, man.
For sure, man. Thank you, Tim.